Good morning, good evening, good day, and welcome to Dramabuds. I'm Francine, I really love K-dramas, and I'm going to spend as much time as I want talking about them. Welcome to my podcast. So hello everyone. Today's episode is kind of a literary criticism episode. This is me going full on high school English class mode where I just am dissecting everything more so than usual. Like this is me really trying to be as analytic as possible with what I'm watching and trying not to let, my viewing experience affect my opinions of what I'm watching. And so, today we're going to talk about formulaic K-dramas. And which, I'll define everything later. Just so we're on the same page about what's formulaic? What's a formulity? Don't worry about that. I'll set everything straight later. But for now, let's talk about how we ended up here. Okay, so honestly, I just finished Pinocchio, the Park Hye Lee Jong Suk show written by Park Hye Ryun. I'll just call her PHR because her name is difficult to pronounce. Look, I only watched Pinocchio. One, to watch Park Hye in before she tried to have ambition with her roles, when she just took simpler rom-com roles. And I have to tell you, some actors, period, when they take roles that, match their skill level, it's amazing. She's just I don't hide that I don't like Park Shin-ye's acting, right? I feel like that's, I think that's something we should all know by now. I really don't like her acting. Because I feel like she's so not great. She's just not that great at anything aside from crying and pouting. So, and looking scared, by the way, her three faces. But in this role, it's just simple. She's just a whiny girl and with some sadness and her dreams and her mother who left her. And, it's just a simple role, really. No ambition required to pull this off. Susie could pull this off. And that is, that's another one. Those two. Interchangeable. They could both play this role. And they would both do perfectly fine in it because it does not call for much. And in this role, I was like, I'm not gonna criticize her. She's doing a perfectly fine job because her ambition or the role matched her skill level for once. So she was okay to watch. Finally. I could tolerate her in a role. And it's not as typical damsel in distress, pitiful girl role as the heirs, which boxed her into that role for a while. In has not that bad of a character. Anyway, sorry I was going into the Pinocchio flash review. That's for later. But anyway, one, I watched it to see if Park Shin-ye can be decent in anything that I watch. And also, to judge if PHR is really a decent or even a good writer and Startup was just a fluke. Because, the PHR cinematic universe, it's okay. It's well received or decently received, People rave about While You Were Sleeping. I'll get there someday. I'll try I Can Hear Your Voice first and then While You Were Sleeping. But anyway, yeah. So, people like PHR's works. And then Startup was the one that just was so polarizing. So, yeah, maybe Startup was a fluke. But it's not. And I will explain why it's not just a fluke. Because I realized that many of the things I saw in Pinocchio, I also saw in Startup. And I didn't watch While You Were Sleeping. My sister did. So I just, I checked with her, did this happen in while you were sleeping, or this plot point, or this kind of character progression? And yeah, pretty much a lot of the same things in while you were sleeping as well. So in a way, Park Hye Ryun's strength and weakness is the formula that she sticks to. Like all those similarities, you know, in a way it's a strength because it can be good, you know, based on like how people rave about while you were sleeping. And like the fact that, you know, despite my hatred for Park Shin-ye, I didn't hate Pinocchio. Like it is in, you know, I'm a bit apathetic to it, which is a little bit worse than hatred. But you know, like at least I won't say I actively hate it the way I actively hated, you know, Startup and Doctor Stranger or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, that's her strength, but also her weakness. Because like when she tries to subvert her formula, how she usually does things start to fall apart. So yes, I mentioned I'll give a flash review of Pinocchio later. Don't worry, I will rant more about Pinocchio later. But it's not that bad of a rant because I told you, I don't feel that good or bad towards it. So I just watched it. Anyway, so today's episode, I'm going to be discussing formulaic writing. And I would like to clarify that I'm talking about formulaic writing not in terms of like a genre. Like let's say, rom-com, the rom-com formula, or a thriller formula or something, or a political intrigue formula. No, not in terms of genre. Like, I guess a genre asks for certain things from its plot and from its characters. So you'd say, isn't that a formula? Isn't that tropey writing? Or like, you know, you'd say, what? Any show following a 3-act structure? Or any show with a hero's journey is formulaic? No. I'm not going to delve on that. I'm going to talk more about specific writers and their works and how they, as a writer, as one creator, they have their own formula. Okay, so you may ask now, all right, so what's a formula to you then, huh? Like, what are you basing this literary criticism off? Another half-baked concept that you don't fully understand? Yeah. Okay, like, the initial topic for this episode was, like, style versus formula. Like, is this a writer's style or are they following a formula? And then, like, I realized I don't really want to talk about that. So, okay, at least in my definition, style talks about how they write and tell stories. Meanwhile, the formula is kind of what the story is composed of and how it flows. Essentially, the formula is the what and the style is the how. And so, I have nothing to say about style. Some writers, well, one, I don't speak the language, so I wouldn't know if like the actual writing, like the words, dialogue, if they flow well, if they are awkward or not. Like, guys, I read subtitles. What do I know about the Korean language? All I know are my feelings. But yeah, I not my jurisdiction. I'm trying to go with the more, you know, the objective stuff that I can kind of talk about. The formula, what the story is composed of. And also, this video was supposed to be about tropes. Like, that was my next idea. Should I talk about tropey writing? And then I realized it's not so much, it's not just the tropes, you know? It's not, I'm not going to say like some tropes are bad and only these tropes are good. Like, I can deal with most tropes. Even like terminal illness, even amnesia. I think I can deal with it. In some ways, it could be done well. But yeah, I realized that it's the personal formula, a writer's formula that I really want to discuss. So for me, the formula is tropes and plot devices that are used in similar ways in various works of one writer. You know, the similarities in a writer's body of work, that's their personal formula. And so, you know, we have to ask, why do they work? Like, why do writers develop that formula? Why do they have, you know, those set of tropes and plot devices that they use pretty much in every single, you know, show that they write? So what's so good about it? And it sounds like I'm hating on formulas that I'm saying, it's lazy that they do this. They have no creativity. They should be unique with every single work they do. But I'm not like that. Like, no. Okay, first of all, people tend to develop these tropes and these plot devices, and then they work, and then they just stick to it. Because if something works, then go for it. Don't fix what's not broken. And next, like, before I start the show, I check if I know the director and the writer. Because, like, if I know their previous works, it gives me an expectation. Like, it sets expectations, and I kind of know what I'm getting into. Like, for example, Vincenzo. Before I watched it, like right before I watched it, the moment, the Netflix logo showed up, that's the first time or the only time I checked the writer and the director. And then I saw the writer was The Good Manager and The Fiery Priest. And then my expectations dropped. I mentioned this in my Q1 recap. Like, okay, well, I guess I have no expectations for the show anymore because I know what I felt about those two shows. I never finished them. So, I love Song Joong Ki, and now I love John Yoo Bin, so I guess I'll just continue it. But I know I'm not really enjoying it for, the actual humor, which is supposed to be the strongest point of the show. Anyway, see, knowing the writer, knowing how they do things, knowing their formula sets expectations. And so I knew what I was kind of getting into. And sometimes, when expectations match reality, it's... And you like those expectations, by the way. You're expecting good things, and it matches what you actually get. It's a great experience. It's a very satisfying experience. It's like, you came in here wanting like a good, wholesome show that's going to make you laugh, and sometimes it's going to be emotional and sad, and you fall in love with the characters. Like, that's what you expect, and then that's what you got. Wonderful, great. I got nothing bad to say about that. Sometimes you come in with no expectations, and then the show exceeds it. That's amazing. That's the best feeling. That's me with like Beyond Evil and Live. Oh, Live. Anyway, so yeah, but sometimes when expectations match reality, perfect. Got no complaints. And essentially these expectations or like the formula that you've developed as a writer, it's kind of a promise that you're giving the audience, like I've done it before. I can do it again. And so they kind of expect that. And so you promised it. So just deliver it, Just give people the good, wholesome show that they wanted. Or like the exciting thriller or something. I don't know. Just give people what they want. Don't try to mess yourself up by changing the formula when it works. So yes, like, I think formulas are okay if good writers use them well. I'll give an example later, don't worry. Like, good writers can use similar tropes and themes and make it feel fresh. Because their writing is more than just the tropes, the combination of tropes and plot devices that they've used in this one show that managed to work. Like, they'll add something to it. They'll really change up the characters, but for some reason, they still end up in this similar situation. And then things don't end up the exact same way because these characters are different people, and different people react differently to even just the same situation. Like, just nuances in writing, really. It's the writing. And, once again, we've watched so many shows with some childhood friends falling in love, or with some love triangles, or people who turn from rivals to lovers. Like, we've watched so many of those. And some of them can still feel great and fresh and fun and entertaining. So it's possible, to use a formula to make it work. As long as the writing itself, aside from the use of the tropes, as long as it's good. However, formulas do tend to be bad. Sometimes. Most of them. Sometimes. I can't say I've watched like a lot of shows with the same writer. Like, just a handful. And, some of them are like one show was a hit, the other show was a miss. It happens. But anyway, like, formulas can be bad because at some point, it does get repetitive. You realize this is the third show I've watched of this writer and they've done this again, and they're not even trying to spin it differently. Like, if there are some twists, like, oh, apparently the mother was the big bad guy. It's like, wait, they've done this in the last show. Should have known this was going to happen. The twists aren't that surprising anymore because the writer has done it before. And it's really bad when it feels like you're just watching the same show, but with slightly different characters and a different setting. Because it's really bad when the characters are interchangeable. Like, I will give examples later. And yeah, when you realize like the tropes aren't fresh, that's when I know the writing is not that great. It doesn't feel like you've spun anything new to it. It just is not good. What a terrible description. But I think you get what I mean. You know what those are. It's like, oh, is this writer really not sick of using the same they were separated because of a traumatic accident or something like that? Like, this is the third show you've done this in. No specific examples. I'm just giving really cliche tropes here. Okay. So, I guess an example of a writer who uses the formula well, who uses their formula well, by the way, their personal, like, the tropes that they've, started using and just stuck to throughout several works, is writer Lee Woo Jung of the Reply series and Hospital Playlist. In a way, I can also kind of attribute these tropes to Shin Won-ho PD, who I feel like is very much involved in the writing. Because, like, even Prison Playbook, which wasn't written by writer Lee, had a lot of the same tropes and the same brand of humor. I feel like his style dictates what is going to be written. So I don't know how the work is split, or the creative direction is split between the PD and the writer in terms of like Shin PD's works. So back to writer Lee. Her formula I can mostly see in the Reply series, obviously, because like they kind of have the same theme. You know what I mean? Like, the Reply series, it's a series. They're meant to have similarities. And then like a little bit, I can see a little bit of it in Hospital Playlist. So just a disclaimer, in the Reply series, I've only watched 97 and 88. And so here are the tropes that I've identified, but I'm sure there are way more. And these tropes are not like, the usual tropes that you see. Just like, I just call it tropes, but they're really just similarities in the work. You'll get it. You'll get what I mean. So like, childhood friends, love triangle, the mystery husband/husband hunt. In the first snow, the couple in the first snow will fall in love or something. Someone hitting on the main character sibling. Even like episode 6 being the turning point for a certain couple in the show. Those are constantly being used in the Reply series and in Hospital Playlist. We know it. So, yeah, these tropes have been repeated several times, but it's not the reason why these shows are so popular. You know why these shows are so popular? It's one, the nostalgia, two, the characters, and three, the community. It's like, first of all, the nostalgia. Obviously, the biggest draw of the Reply series is not, the husband hunt, not the love triangle. It's the nostalgia. It's why people love it so much, because like, I remember hearing this from Tablo from Epic High, his podcast, Tablo podcast. Stream it. I love listening to that podcast so much. Anyway, he talked about like how the Reply series made him sad because, back then that was his life. And now it's a throwback, the feeling that something that used to be your everyday life is now the source of nostalgia, or something that is a throwback, or something that people look at it as if it's a completely different time. It's just that feeling of like, whoa, wait, has it really been that long that those days are now the good old days? That's, I think, why people love the Reply series so much. And actually, Hospital Playlist has a bit of nostalgia as well. Like, the songs that they perform are all from the 2000s or even way before. And yeah, even the flashback scenes to the med school days of the Lacking Five, like, seeing their fashion, what the gadgets they used, the way they talked about the future. It's like, remember those days when we didn't think phones could do this, or when we had to use those clunky, those clunky phones and beepers or whatever? I don't know. I was a child. I was an infant back then. Anyway, so yeah, like, people love it. People love the Reply series and Hospital Playlist because they can look back at the past and see it, and like laugh at themselves, laugh at the fashion, laugh at the things that they used to be obsessed with back then, and just reminisce. That is the main reason why the Reply series was so popular. Like, I'm sorry, nothing else. Not really the love triangle between, Doksun and the other two. Like, no, it's not it. It may be a part of it, but it's because people loved the nostalgia so much. And they also loved the characters and the community. Like, okay, I just have to say it. Some characters, though, between shows are interchangeable. Like, Song Shi-won from 97 and Song Dok-sun from 88. You can pretty much, exchange their personalities. Exchange the two of them because they kind of have the same personality, like loud and stupid. I don't know about Go-ara in 94. Maybe she's also loud and stupid. I don't know. But that seems to be the common main girl characteristics. The only difference is that, Shiwon lived in the fangirl times, and Doksun, I don't know what she did. I don't get her character. All she was loud and annoying. And a great loving daughter. Sure. Yeah. I'm sorry. I hate Doksun actually. She's really annoying to me. Anyway, so yeah, okay. That's my criticism, I guess. But more than the main girl, the characters that people really, really love are, the squad around her and the community around them. That's what makes the Reply series so loved. And like in Hospital Playlist, we love the Lucky Five, and then we also got to meet, their families, their residents, their whole, all their patients even. Like, it's the feeling that you are really watching the lives of a whole community. You're immersed in their daily life. Like, you're just surrounded by a bunch of good, wholesome people. Like, no villains here. The only villain, I guess, is, the older brother from 97 who was a predator, by the way, hitting on a high school student while he was a high school teacher. You nasty, nasty man. He's the only villain in the Reply series, I think. But yes, like, they're all just a bunch of good people, going through some tough things at times, but then it's the community that pulls them back, that takes care of them, and you feel the warmth and the love of their communities. And the great thing is that this sense of community grows as the series expands. Like, from 97 as the first show, it was mostly just a squad of friends and some of their families. Like, only, Doksun had really... Doksun. Only Shiwon had, like, very prominent parents. But the rest of them kind of were just dealing with their own stuff. And then, by the time it was 88, it's like, okay, everyone had a family. Everyone's families had stories. Their families had stories, crossing each other. Like, it was a huge, expansive community that, like, twisted and tired and interwoven and all that. Like, the sense of community grew with the show. So, yeah, I think that's what really drew people to the show and made them love Reply so much. And Hospital Playlist, sorry. Yeah, the thing with writer Lee's works is that, people know what to expect. Like, we kind of expect, yeah, okay, there's gonna be love triangle, they're all gonna be friends, and What else? What else did they say? Someone's gonna hit on the main character's sibling. It's going to happen. We know. Okay, fine. And at times it's a little annoying and a little cliche, but the biggest draw of the show is not the tropes. It's the small changes in every show. Like, I can confidently say that writer Lee's works get better and better with each show after. Like, okay, 97 is rough. Yeah. And I haven't watched 94, and a lot of people say it's the worst, but I'm sure it's cleaned up a lot of like the rough edges of 97 because it was really still like a sitcom. Like, it was not as, polished and as cohesive as 88. Like, 88 definitely is the peak of the Reply series in terms of quality. But I can say that Hospital Playlist is better than 88 for me. Not just because of how I felt, but just I think the way it was structured is just so much more cohesive. Yeah, I guess so. Or just like, it's just right. It's, once again, my main criticism of 88 was that it was so bloated with too much time. It had too much time. 20 episodes of nearly 1.5 hours. It was too much time for them. And they filled it with nothing towards the middle. It was just a little bit of a mess for me. But Hospital Playlist gets 12 episodes a season. So they are more concise. They're more concise. But it still feels packed with all the good, wholesome feelings and the loving community and all that. Essentially, formulaic K-dramas can be good when they set the right expectations and those expectations are met adequately. And the thing is, the tropes in the Reply series and writer Lee's works in general, the tropes aren't seen as like, oh god, they're doing this again, like someone's hitting on a sibling again. It's not seen that way. I think it's just how people generally love this show so much. Like, the praise is near universal, really. I mean, I'm sure some people aren't into it because it's boring and it's slow. I get it. But it is a vast majority of people who really love the show. Anyway, the tropes are now seen as like, oh, it's referencing the previous shows. See, like, when something is that loved, instead of being seen as like not being creative, as doing the same story over and over again, it's seen as like, ooh, it's a reference to the past. Like, do you get it? And some other writers will be criticized like, oh god, you're doing this story again. But people, like, I mean, they're either super into it or they just notice it and it's like, they're doing that again, Yeah. So I think, in a way, writer Lee is a good example of, using a formula. Okay, same tropes, very similar tropes throughout all your works. Yeah. But it kind of gets better. It grows over time, it doesn't just stay the same and then you hope that maybe it'll still work out and no one's gonna get sick of us doing the same thing. Like, hey, they could have continued the Reply series until the 1970s or to the 2000s or whatever. They could have kept going with that nostalgia trip. But no, they decided to, let's stop the series. I don't know if it's permanently. I think so, honestly. Like, I think they've moved on. Though I would love to see a Reply 2004, 2005, Suju TV XQ days. But yeah. Okay. Now that we have a good example of using a formula, we must provide a bad example. So sit down, relax. We are going to talk about startup again. All right. We talk about Park Hye Ryun, PHR today. And, oh Lord. Okay, note, disclaimer. I am not comparing PHR to writer Lee, okay? I'm comparing works of the same writer so that there's a baseline, It's like, what if, like, the writer Lee is just a really, really good writer compared to PHR? I don't know, maybe like apples and oranges, So let's not. That's why when I say formula, I really am talking about a writer's personal favorite tropes so that it's easier to compare because, if the same person wrote the show, then they're like, it's fair to compare the works. Anyway, so I'm talking about the shows I'll talk about, PHR works I'll talk about are Pinocchio, Startup, and While You Were Sleeping. So, based on my observation and like most opinions I've heard, the ranking is this: Startup at the bottom, Pinocchio in the middle, While You Were Sleeping at the top. Like, people really rave about While You Were Sleeping. Okay, I haven't watched it, but based on my discussion with my sister, I do think that some of the pitfalls that I've noticed in Pinocchio kind of was remedied in While You Were Sleeping. So, that's a good thing, right? PHR got better, improved from the previous work, and then just like took a nosedive into Startup. Okay, we'll get there later. So, similarities between Pinocchio and Startup, which I guess they didn't really follow in While You Were Sleeping, or I don't know, whatever. Actually, I don't think they did. Okay, so, similarities. Genius male lead, spunky female lead who, somehow is not succeeding in her career yet. Childhood connection between the leads. Letters or texts, in the case of Pinocchio, that were someone was catfishing the FL who received the letters / the text, or gave the letters / text. And there's a love triangle with the two leads and the catfish guy, second lead. Okay, similarities between Pinocchio and While You Were Sleeping, based on, me comparing notes with my sister, by the way. Once again, have not watched While You Were Sleeping. I'll get there someday. Just give me, I'm going to be watching 3 Lee Jong-suk shows in a row, okay? Give me a break. Anyway, so similarities, the fantasy concept. Like, there's a fantasy concept used as the central plot device. So, something similar among all 3, there's this turning point where the male lead turns dark or cold, and the second lead slightly vanishes when they've quote unquote lost to the male lead in the love triangle. And the ending is a wedding or whatever, some cheesy whatever. Anyway, so I would say that the formula is okay in Pinocchio and While You Were Sleeping because of the fantasy concept. I really think that's what tied everything together. Okay, because in a way, the fantasy concept hindered the leads somehow, gave them a problem to deal with, or some internal conflict, I guess, to deal with. And it also made them or forced them to tackle some moral issues, in Pinocchio, Choi In-ha wanting to be a journalist, and also eventually Ki Ha-myung, Lee Jong-suk's character, eventually them becoming reporters, made them tackle how the media affected people's lives, which I think is a very interesting moral issue. As reporters, it is their responsibility to deal with how their words affect public perception and how that affects the lives of the people they're reporting on, And Choi In-ha, the fact that I'll just refer to them as the actors, okay? Lee Jong-suk's character, his father or his life was uprooted because of, how the media reported on his father's accident, I guess, or incident, and how a Pinocchio, someone with the Pinocchio syndrome, who can't lie, they hiccup if they lie, said that, okay, hey, I'm telling the truth, that the father was really ran away and left his squad mates to die. I'm a Pinocchio, listen to me. See, so the concept is integrated into the inciting incident, the incident that really changed his life. And Choi In-ha, Park Shin-ye, is a Pinocchio, so it hinders her from achieving her dreams, because her dream or her goal to be a reporter, because it seems good that your reporter can't lie because people will trust the reporter more, but that also prevents her from being able to do her job sometimes, because she can't lie to get information out of someone. Hey, they gotta do some dirty tricks sometimes to get their information, or to get a meeting with someone. there are just hindrances to her being a Pinocchio. I mean, like, with her being a Pinocchio to getting her goal. I get it. And the moral issue with While You Were Sleeping is, I don't know, their dreams tell them that they can do something to save lives. I don't know, I haven't watched the show, but I think there is a moral issue with the saving lives thing. So yeah, okay, and the fantasy concept helped propel that, right? My issue though with the fantasy concept in Pinocchio is that they're constantly adding rules. So, okay, here's the thing. The Pinocchio syndrome in that universe, they hiccup when they're lying. I mentioned it, right? And it's known in the show's universe. Like, everyone knows about Pinocchios. It's not like, oh, only the Inha is the only Pinocchio and no one understands how Pinocchios work and all that. However, why? Why does Park Shin hiccup whenever she feels like something is wrong? Like, I don't know, when she, like, there was this case where people were slipping because of the icy roads, and then they were supposed to just stand by and wait for people to slip, to get a good shot for the news report later that night. And then, like, when they were just waiting there, standing and then letting people slip, she started hiccuping, and I was like, where's the lie though? Why are you lying? you know my only explanation is that maybe it's like, oh, she's lying to herself by not doing something that she really wants to. She's denying herself of her truth, which is that she wants to help. So many, like, mental gymnastics just to try to fit it into that, the rule in the universe that Pinocchios hiccup when they lie. So I don't know, the hiccuping turns into, like, a litmus test, a metal detector, a dowsing rod for, like, when something is wrong, Park Shin-ye will hiccup. That's how we know something is wrong. Because for some reason, why is the Pinocchio hiccuping for some reason? Who knows? I couldn't explain that. I really didn't like that. I brought that up when I was talking about While You Were Sleeping with my sister, and then she said, and While You Were Sleeping, yeah, sometimes, like, apparently it's because if you have a connection with someone, that's why you dream about them. I don't know. But the thing is, like, with While You Were Sleeping, they didn't understand the dreams. They didn't understand the fantasy concept. And so, if something new is introduced, it seems like, it's just a revelation, It's just, a plot twist. So they're discovering things. So it's okay that the rules are being, quote unquote, added as they go, because, in a way, maybe that rule has always been in place. They just never knew about it. That's fair. But anyway, yeah, that's, in many ways though, I've heard that While You Were Sleeping is really the best, better than Pinocchio, which I guess I can agree with, because Pinocchio leaves me very ambivalent. It's okay. As I mentioned, yeah, discovering things about the fantasy concept, it's treated as a revelation or as plot twist, not just like, them working the plot device and making it, like, convenient for them. Yeah. Many also say, like, the second lead syndrome is really intense, like Jung Hae-in's the best second lead ever or something. Because honestly, the second lead in Pinocchio is kind of creepy stalker who catfishes her and then, becomes her coworker to be with her and then just becomes her friend. And yeah, it's weird. I never rooted for him. Like, he becomes nice, of course. Like, he becomes her friend and they're okay. But, like, the start of it was weird. And yeah, the childhood connection between Lee Jong-suk and Park Shin-ye's character is really strong. Even if it's faux incest, by the way. And yeah, weakness of Pinocchio is that the leads don't have much chemistry, at least how I felt it. It's like, it's passable, it's fine. It's not like explosive chemistry. I think chemistry is just Lee Jong-suk's strength. Like, I'm sure if I watch I Can Hear Your Voice, him with Lee Bo-young, I'm sure I'm gonna see something there. Because he's really good at that. But yeah, the weird thing really is that it's just faux incest. It's faux incest between the fake uncle and the niece. So it's just weird. But I don't know, I guess I'll tolerate it. It was okay. Not the best, not the worst. So, moving on to Startup. Why is Startup the worst among the three? Okay, to give Startup some credit, like, I feel like this was Park Hye Ryun try to subvert some of her tropes. Like, just changing it up a little bit, But then, a little bit actually, it wasn't the little bit that she changed that was really bad. It was the big thing that she changed. So, wait, first of all, something she changed. Nam Darum is not the child actor of the male lead, which I think is a huge, like, bait and switch. Because, when you see Nam Darum in a Park Hye Ryun show, it's gonna be Lee Jong Suk in the future. Or, yeah, just the male lead in the future. And then to find out that it was Ji Pyong, it was just Good Boy. It wasn't, Nam Do-san. Was a little weird. Next, the person with the childhood connection with the female lead is not the male lead. It was actually the second lead. And then the male lead just takes advantage of it. And then the big bad, or the big bad guy appears like 2/3 of the way into the show, wreaks havoc, and then he just vanishes right after. Like, after he takes, the Samsan Tech trio for the Aquahar, he's just gone. And then that problem's gone. And then another thing that changed is that the second lead loses purpose after the love triangle is resolved. And he isn't brought back for the plot because of, like, what the big bad is doing, unlike the other shows. Like, I forgot what While You Were Sleeping did, but with Pinocchio, it's like, okay, second lead kind of vanished when it was pretty, when, Lee Jong-suk and Park Shin-ye were pretty solid already, and he kind of had no hope, and then he just stayed with his mom, by his mom's side, but his mom was the big bad. So, when it came to, like, finally bringing her down, that's when he had a role again. He was important to the plot again, but for, like, 4 or 5 episodes, he was kind of not important at all. So, yeah. But unlike the others, Ji Pyong was just strung along until the end. It's like they kind of extended the love line or the love triangle, but he kind of had no hope, really. So, whatever. And I think the greatest loss, the big change that really messed everything up, was losing the greatest strength of her shows. In Startup, there was no fantasy concept. And I think in all the other PHR shows, that was what really kept it all cohesive. Because, like, the female lead's journey is usually about overcoming the fantasy concept. I won't talk about the male lead. Because at least in Pinocchio, it was just the female lead. But her journey is usually about, still achieving whatever she wants to achieve. By overcoming the fantasy concept somehow, or managing to work with it. But now it's just overcoming poverty. She's not even that. It's not even like poor. She's living a pretty decent life. I don't know. No, sorry. Kidding aside, her journeys, following her dreams. And so you may ask, is following your dreams a bad theme? No, it's not. It's a perfectly fine theme. What are you talking about? It's not bad, but the show as a whole, because it lacks the fantasy concept, it's not nearly as gripping as the other two. Because without the fantasy concept, it now highlights PHR's greatest weakness, which are her characters. I would say PHR is good at plot. Like, the plot of Pinocchio, not amazing, but it was engaging enough, and the fantasy concept kept things pretty cohesive. And While You Were Sleeping, people said it's really engaging and all that. So she's good at, like, oh, this is gonna happen, like, when things are happening, she's good at kind of tying everything together, making the whole show go full circle. Like, she's good at that. I'll really give her that. It's fine. But the characters themselves are thin. Because, like, okay, PHR decided not to go plot heavy for Startup. But the characters still feel like plot vehicles. Honestly, in Pinocchio, it felt like they were just kind of in the middle of things as it was all going. But to say that they had, like, some really huge, emotionally deep transformation, I feel like it's not just me who can say that you don't feel that way. I think others would agree with me. But anyway, the problem with them just being plot vehicles is that the actual problems, though, encountered in the plot are quickly solved in the span of an episode. As if it wasn't that big of a deal at all. You know, it's just like, oh, there's a problem with the code. Okay, clackety clack. Solved. Dawson solved it. Magic. It's like, oh no, I don't know what to present. Or like, oh, we're competing against Injay's group. Clackety clack with Dawson and his magic hands. Suddenly the code is perfect or whatever. You know, it's like, okay. If it were that big of, if you could solve it that easily, then why'd we act like it was the end of the world? I don't know. Anyway, without, the intense setup, of the fantasy concept, the moral dilemma, okay, without that, we now have to focus on the characters and their internal journey, and that has to carry the show. However, their internal struggles are easily solved by the plot. It's like the plot is easily solved by the plot vehicles that are characters, and the characters' internal issues somehow are just railroaded by the plot. Like, okay, Dalmi becoming a CEO by spotting trends. Like, she wanted to be a CEO, right? Okay, you're a CEO now. You get a t-shirt. Everyone gets a t-shirt. Or like, Dawson's confidence issues or whatever. It's like, here you go, time skip. When you come back, you are rich and confident. Don't even worry about it. Let's not deal with how you're gonna get there. If that's what it's kind of like the issues with the plot. It's like, if that's all it took to solve your issues, why did it take so long? Just it just seems like every problem of theirs, internal and external, just like, fell away, just like blew away when they decided, oh no, we have to do something about it. Whoosh, the plot. Whoosh, the internal struggle. So, I don't know, it just felt so inconsequential because it seems like you barely even have to work to get to fix what's going on. I don't know. And for a show that is not as plot heavy, you'd think they're gonna invest in the characters. Not just the main characters, also the secondary characters. Even the secondary characters don't have much depth. Like, Injay is just used as a foil for Dalmi. And then after the time skip, she's the prop for her success. Just to keep Dalmi motivated to be spiteful and succeed in spite of her sister. Just to keep Dalmi going and to have her compete against someone. And then, after that, it's like, okay, we're on the same side. I am now going to help you in your success. Because that's all Injay is. Like, she doesn't have her own thing to deal with. That's why I like her. Girl bothers no one, really. She just minds her own business, and yet she's still used as a device for this stupid plot. Anyway, we now have to move on to Ji Pyong, who I won't talk about extensively anymore. I'm tired. I have a 2-hour podcast with my sister for that exact, reason. Just listen to that. Anyway, Ji Pyong is just an emotional punching bag from start to end. They, made him the lonely orphan who had no one except Halmoni, and then in the end, he still had no one except Halmoni and the plant. That's enough for me. They even strung him along, kind of half prolonging this love triangle, even though he has no purpose in the plot. You know why? Because they never wrote him to be a character. They wrote him to be, that extra corner in a love triangle that doesn't matter. It's really stupid. They didn't write him. They didn't write a character. They wrote him to be a second lead to be used in the love triangle. And then, unlike the other shows I mentioned where the second lead is brought back to bring down the big bad, he doesn't even get to do that anymore. So, his role for the last 4 episodes, what role? He's just there to look sad and, be pitied and, gosh. It's just, do you get me? Do you get my point? These characters are Did you even try to write the characters after deciding that, okay, we're not gonna do that plot heavy of a show anymore? Really? Gosh, I mean, maybe Startup would have been better if they uncovered some conspiracy through their tech, or, just something plot heavy, aside from the random revenge plot and the Acquire. Like, maybe it would have been better if Startup just went the same path as the other PHR shows and did something plot heavy. But as a character show, it's weak. Or like, maybe other PHR shows had weak characters too. Maybe they were not, like, I'm not saying, I'm not saying like, at the moment, I think they're super strong. I still think they're plot devices. Like, they're just, plot vehicles. That's what I call them. I still think the characters in, like, Pinocchio are just plot vehicles, but at least the plot that they are driving forward is a little more substantial. So, maybe other PHR shows had weak characters too, but the plot was substantial enough to carry me through, 20 episodes of Pinocchio. Okay, in defense of my criticisms, you may ask, why can't you just evaluate Startup for what it is and not in comparison to the other PHR shows? I just did. That's literally what I did this time. Like, my 2-hour podcast episode with my sister was all just feelings and anger. No objective. Like, no objectivity. No attempt to really be critical. Like, guys, I've calmed down significantly, okay? This is really me analyzing this show to the best of my ability and seeing that even without comparison to the other shows, hey, Startup was the first PHR show I've watched, okay? I didn't have Pinocchio or While You Were Sleeping for comparison. It was the first PHR show I watched, and in my first watch, it still felt off. Something still felt off about that show. So I think, like, yes, my opinions were clouded by the viewing experience and all that. But I think from the get-go, I really was not pleased with what I was watching. And like, okay, you may say like, okay, why are you always comparing other works to each other? All right, I'll give you like a specific incident where, yeah, case in point, Lee Woo Jung, writer of Stranger 1 and 2 and Life. So the timeline is Stranger 1, Life, Stranger 2. Life was the first Lee Woo Jung show I watched, okay? Just so you know, I did not watch Stranger first. Life was the first show of theirs that I watched. And, after I watched that, which I found it pretty good, I liked my first watch of it. Anyway, and then I found out that Life was considered a flop, especially after the success of Stranger. Like, even Cho Sung-woo called it a flop. You know why? Because people expected to get Stranger 2.0, They thought they were gonna get the same level of, like, wow, intense murder, mystery, intricate, whatever. But who said you were going to get that? Who told you to expect that? Did Lee Woo Jung say, I'm going to write another intricate murder mystery with Cho Sung-woo as the protagonist? No. Okay? Expectations did not meet reality. Okay? And Life's reception suffered from that. Like, that's what's sad. Because, like, I think if it were evaluated on its own, the way I first watched it, I think it's really good. And then I watched Life again. I thought it was really good in my rewatch, and then I watched Stranger, and I thought Stranger 1 is also really, really good. But I would still say Life was still good. The thing is, I analyzed it separately, I did not watch the quote-unquote superior show first, and then Life, as if Life was that terrible compared to Stranger. Like, it's just not the same genre even. So, it's more political than it is like a mystery, suspense, thriller, I guess, if that's what you think Stranger is. So yeah. The only criticism I would say of Life is like, the ending is a little underwhelming, but for me, it's very realistic, and I love it. I still love Life. What was my point with telling the Lee Woo Jung cinematic universe? Yeah, those people who hated or who called Life a flop and failure compared to Stranger, it's like not even close to Stranger's level. Yeah, because apples and oranges within the same, even with the same writer, some shows are apples and oranges. Like, it's really good in its own, guys. It's not meant to be compared to Stranger. But that's what it's not what I'm doing to Startup, okay? I just have a frame of reference, PHR's previous works. But in the first place, something was off about Startup. I didn't like it in my first watch before I even watched the other PHR shows. Okay, so back to talking about formulas. Sometimes formulas work because it plays to a writer's strengths. Like, of course, when a formula first hits, like these set of tropes, like, you'd think, damn, I must be really good at writing this, and that. So maybe next time I'll work this, and that into my next show and then change it up a little bit. I think that's a pretty decent practice, honestly. Because you get to keep your strengths. Because if your strengths are really how you tie together those tropes, then okay, keep the tropes. It's fine. But however, when they subvert their tropes or they veer away from it, apparently that's when the weaknesses of their writing is revealed. And that's what happened with Startup. So, to end this on a good note, because, I brought Startup back, like, I thought we were over that show, but okay, let's end this with some positivity. I would like to introduce you to my favorite writer, Noh Hee Kyung, writer of It's Okay, That's Love, Live, and Dear My Friends. This writer, for me, has no formula. I've watched 3 of their works, the modern ones. There's a whole backlog that I could go through, but maybe not. And I genuinely believe that Noh Hee Kyung does not fall for these pitfalls, I guess. First of all, I absolutely loved It's Okay, That's Love and Live. Obviously, as you should all know by now. And I'm halfway through Dear My Friends, and I'm loving it so much as well. Like, not just the tears, okay? Not just me crying over these old ladies, but just everything about it. Later, or maybe someday, I'll write a review. And you know that feeling when it feels like some K-drama writers just write dramas to put something out there, to have work because they need money, because they need to keep going, to keep working, which, of course, they must. However, Noh Hee Kyung feels like a genuine storyteller. Like, she feels like she's not just putting out a drama every 2-3 years because she has to, keep earning money or whatever. It feels like every 2-3 years she releases a drama filled with stories that she wants to tell. And yeah, she has frequent collaborators like Kim Kyu-tae, of course, director for 2-3 of her shows in the past 10 years. Yeah. And actors, like some actors she's been working with since the 2000s, okay? Like, she just has not even specific muses, just people who, she trusts to tell the stories that she wants to tell through the decades. That's amazing to me. And yeah, sometimes she has similar themes and stories, like especially featuring the elderly. I think it's based on her Wikipedia page, which I read because I just admire her writing so much. Heavily inspired. Those stories are heavily inspired by her mother and their relationship. And I've watched 2.5, and I cannot tell if any of the shows I've watched have like a set of tropes that are repeated in her works. I genuinely can't. Like, that's how much I admire Noh Hee Kyung, because I really feel like I'm watching a unique story every single time. Like, her strength really is in the characters that she writes and the relationships between them. Because like the characters, they feel like real people. That's really my number one, the thing I praise the most with her writings, that she writes real people. They are lovable, but frustrating, sometimes questionable. They do questionable things, but they're just real, complicated people with real struggles. And I'm just so invested in everyone. I really felt that in Live and now in Dear My Friends, and It's Okay, That's Love. I want to rewatch that show again. I think I would still love it just as much, the second time around. Now, the relationships between the characters are so complex. It's like it's difficult. They're not clear or clean cut relationships where everyone is just purely loving and supportive, or they're just purely antagonistic and they hate each other. There's a mixture of both all the time. There's love and there's resentment. There is like care and there's frustration. All of that. Like, aren't many of our relationships like that? The people you love sometimes are the ones who bother you the most, but you care about them so much, and you still stick to them despite how frustrating they seem sometimes. I love that. And the thing I also love about how she tackles, elderly characters and their stories, their life stories and struggles, by having old people who have lived long lives. Like, it explores how age and time affect how we see life and our relationships. Like, there's just something different, when time has passed, when time has healed wounds, but the scars are still there. There's just that. It's beautiful writing. You know how difficult it was for me to articulate how much I loved all the relationships in live, right? In my live episode. Um, and just watching Dear My Friends further, like, how do I say it? Further convinces me that, okay, I think that's what she was going for. I think that's why in my review for live, I focus so much on the relationships. Like, that's how I analyzed the show, based on the relationships, because she really does write complex but very intricate and real relationships. It's been months since I finished live. Twice, by the way, twice in this year. And I still feel a little hung up on that show. And it's not just because of Choi Myung-ho, guys. It's not just because of my second lead slash supporting character syndrome, okay? It's because I still want to see them going out on patrols and resolving the issues around them. I want to know if Jung's mentor, like, does he overcome his financial issues, his struggles with his pregnant wife and owning a business? Does Jung-oh, did she really give up on her goal of studying abroad for Sangsu? Is the relationship really going to last? And then I want to know, I want to see them, like, singing in karaoke and having team dinners, even if they're all apart now. Like, I still want to see their everyday life, because I felt like I was there with them through so much going on. I was there with them, and I still want to be there. That's why I feel so hung up on these characters and their lives. And you know, it my feelings for Dear My Friends, even if I'm just halfway, are so similar. It's like, I want to be around these old ladies forever. I want to see how funny and childish and loving they are to each other and to each other's families. And I want to know everything about their past and their relationships with each other and everything they've been through. I'm halfway through the show, and a part of me is scared of how it will end and how everything will. I know I'm gonna be crying so much. Like, oh, I cried already so much in, like, episode 6 and 7. It's not even the pain in my eyes, not even worth it anymore. No, it's totally, totally worth it. I have to continue the show. I have to finish the show, but it's going to hurt me. I can already tell. I really think that Noh Hee Kyung is the best character driven writer. Is that what I could call her? Like, a writer who really just tells stories and is consistently good. Unlike, say, the writers of Missing and My Mister, whose other works, were not that great. Like, it seemed like it was just a fluke. Wow, that's so mean. But it felt like there's just incredible work felt like a fluke, because it seems like it's not consistent to their other works. I don't know. maybe that's just the magic of my favorite director, Kim Won-suk PD. It's never going to happen. But if Kim Won-suk and Noh Hee Kyung ever work together, it's over for me. I know the emotional devastation I'm going to feel when my favorite writer, with all her character-driven, slice of life works, right amount of sadness, right amount of, light, happy, uplifting moments, and all these themes, and then, portray all of those through the creative license of my favorite director, who fills everything with silence and just every shot with meaning. I will be devastated. But thank God that's never going to happen, because I don't think my heart can handle it. Or I feel like my expectations will be so high, and I will be so afraid that it will disappoint me. So thank God that's never going to happen. Anyway, whatever. It's done. We're done. We're done with this episode. Final thoughts. As you can see, Startup still lives rent-free in my mind, ready to be criticized at any given moment. Okay, like if you talk to me and say, what are your thoughts about Startup? Let's go. Let's go right now. I'll tell you everything. I can do a recap of that 2-hour podcast. Oh, cut into one hour podcast because it's just me now. But I can go on and on about what I can criticize about this show. But now that I know that PHR is not a terrible writer, like, okay, she can do decent K-dramas. Like, I think they're good starter K-dramas because they're plot heavy. And like, characters are good people who have to do good things and all that. Like, okay, whatever. I think that's why it appeals to a lot of people, her works, because they're pretty simple, they're plot heavy, but gripping. I feel like starters, people who are not so into K-dramas and are not as, critical as I am of everything I watch, I think they'll enjoy these shows. Basically, the lesson of this entire episode is that formulas are not bad. Tropes aren't bad. They create expectations, and these expectations help the audience manage their viewing lens, and it helps them understand where you're coming from as a writer and what you're trying to do. So in a way, maybe if I looked at Startup as just like a feel-good show without scrutinizing it to the level that I did, maybe I would have enjoyed it until the end. Like, maybe if I, just enjoyed what I was watching and tried not to question why things seemed so, like, why the obstacles did not seem that consequential, because it seemed like it just fell apart with one touch. Like, if I didn't question any of those and just rooted for Dalmi and her spunky, go-getter attitude, maybe I would have liked Startup. But alas, it's just too late. It's just been tarnished. Like, no second chances here. There's no hope, okay, with this, my relationship with Startup. But Park Hye Ryun, maybe I'll try the other works, definitely. I think now that I've identified that Startup had just flaws, okay? It just had flaws and did not play to the writer's strengths. But the writer is not the worst, but is definitely not the best. Very overrated, I would say. The lesson is that formulas aren't bad, tropes aren't bad, but they can't serve as a crutch for weak writing in all the other aspects, not just the plot or the tropes used. Because when you take away the crutches, that's when things start to fall apart. And that's what happened in Startup. So that's it for me today. I talked a lot today. I did not think I would. Who am I kidding? I knew I would have a lot to say. We're talking about Startup. So there. Watch Live. Watch Dear My Friends. Watch the Reply series. I don't know. There are a lot of great shows. I'm tired. Thank you for listening, and I will see you soon.